What's up, Diablo 4 players? So, brand new massive update for the unique items coming out in Season 5. Now, just as a heads up, if you have these items, you're going to need to acquire brand new ones, even though the unique power will change, which is like the stuff in like kind of like the gold text. The thing is that if you want the rest of the stats, which 99% of the time is going to be better, you're going to have to acquire a brand new one. So, holding on to your old ones, it's not going to be something that you're going to want to do. This will also affect the Eternal Realm, so let's go ahead and hop right into it and check out the brand new changes to all of the unique items for all classes. So starting right out, let's go and check out Tibalt's Will. So the left side will be the old one, the right side will be the brand new one. So we're checking out the brand new uniques, so to speak. And some of these kind of have been completely reworked. So for starters, Tibalt's, we're getting some all stats. That's a nice bonus over there. We also get maximum life, which is quite great. And then the other stat that is brand new, instead of getting damage reduction from close, we now have damage reduction while unstoppable. It also rolls 1% higher. For some builds that can take advantage of that, this could be maybe one of the new best in slots. Now, also wanted to mention specifically on the Necromancer, the Druid, as well as the Sorceress, getting all stats or ranks or plus percent to any of the stats that is your character's main stat will be actually better in Season 5 because you only need 8 of your main stat to get 1% damage bonus versus 10%. So stacking that is definitely going to be advantageous. But as far as it goes, Tibalt's Will, just a small little buff in terms of survivability, and, well, you're going to be able to get like the 1% more damage reduction if you can upkeep that the whole time. But the all stats is definitely not a bad thing at all. Overall, just kind of like a small little buff, not like a, oh my gosh, you need to pick up this item. Next up, the item that always drops, and every time you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, I hate this item. Mother's Embrace. So it's actually a pretty decent rolled item in terms of like the affixes on it, where it's giving you all stats, which is quite nice. That got buffed. We also get attack speed, which is brand new. We're also getting critical strike chance, two of like the best stats on rings, and then also one of the stats that's kind of niche for certain builds, but it's a very good one, which is lucky hit chance. Pretty good overall in terms of the stats on the ring. And then you look at the brand new unique power. Remember, these will be buffed. The very bottom part will get changed, but you're going to have to get a brand new ring for the crit and the lucky hit chance over there, which got buffed by like 2%. So as far as it goes, some stat number changes, but getting attack speed and crit strike chance, even though those are two great stats, the problem is that if a core skills hits 4 more enemies, sure, you can get some extra resource, but you really should be shooting for the Ring of the Starless Skies. But in between, this might not be that bad of an item anymore. But remember, you're losing out on the ability for the X like multiplier on a ring, which could be actually pretty big, and most rings will give you some sort of like resource for your class, but it's not that bad anymore. Still something that will absolutely be replaced, but it's kind of a skip, honestly. Next up though, we have the X-Falls Corroded Signet, which is actually quite nice for damage over time. So you can see over here, we're getting boosted up all stats, also the lucky hit chance, that's staying the same. And then on top of that, we get some vulnerable damage, and then damage over time, that went up triple. We went from the highest roll that you can get was 28, now we're looking at 95, and getting that greater affix, well, hey, you're looking at a pretty good amount of damage, right? And then on top of that, we have the lucky hit, where like your damage over time has some sort of a chance to deal this like big boost of damage, right? Well, that is changing from 50% to 75. Now, it still requires that lucky hit. So if your thing is, let's say, a really low lucky hit, that doesn't just mean it's 75% chance now. It still has to work off of the skills lucky hit. Now, one thing that I think really should be updated, and this applies to a lot of the channeling skills when you're doing some dot damage, hopefully they can readjust to have that like re-proc, because how it works with a lot of them, it only essentially procs off the first one on some skills. So I think that could be kind of looked at, but still not that bad of a ring. I mean, there were some builds that kind of liked it. Usually it was kind of like a leveling item, but I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are on X-Falls. As far as dot build goes, because it doesn't proc off on Darials, and as far as I'm aware of, that's like one of the only top tier dot builds other than like the Bleed Barbarian variant, that it would actually be good. It's just kind of harder to scale that specific damage, but who knows, maybe this will be a newer way to actually play. It's going to be, again, for dot builds only, but maybe you can mix it in some other things. I know that there's like Shadow Dot, there's also, obviously, there's lots of Burn Dot, and then maybe Bleed, but as far as I'm aware of, Poison is like the only top tier one you're running Andariels, which is kind of something that did not play that, because as far as I'm aware of, it still doesn't proc off of Andariels, unless they make some newer update. Next up, we have Butchers. Now, this item was actually pretty decent for PvP, but that was really about it. It's because it applied fear and it slowed people down by a significant amount. So the implicit got changed. Instead of damage to healthy, you have damage to injured, which kind of sucks. This stat is honestly not a very good stat in any video game. You obviously you would want like maybe like a culling strike, or they call it execute in Diablo 3, but we never got execute in Diablo 4 in the way that it works in Diablo 3, which it was like some sort of like two-handed axe, which at 10% or lower, it just kills the enemy, which is kind of a cool thing, but I don't really like this change over here. If this was damage to healthy, I think that would be a lot cooler, but nonetheless, we got some physical damage, damage crowd control, crit strike, damage chance against injured. Again, you want front-loaded damage, not like back-ended damage. But now we're getting attack speed, which is a great stat. And then we also got movement speed, which is kind of unique. And then we got some physical damage, and then we have critical strike chance against feared enemies. I mean, that's a huge amount. I mean, imagine grading this greater affix. We're looking at, what is that, 37.5% crit strike chance. And the lucky hit over here, it's crit striking enemy has up to 100% chance, which could be actually pretty good for like basic builds. This could be something to maybe consider if you want to get a crazy amount of crit strike chance. There's not any other weapon, to my knowledge, is going to give you like 37 crit strike chance. So this could be actually pretty good for that specific reason. So be on the lookout to maybe consider this. I mean, it can't really roll bad here. It's always 100% on the lucky hit. So if it's a 50% lucky hit, that just means straight up like 50%. Not that bad, because before, like, the stats were so bad. And remember, you are losing out on a legendary, like, you know, aspect, but for 37 crit, not something that I would say is like garbage. Now, this item over here is kind of cool. Azarath. We already had an Azarath build that was really good. There's like a Doombringer Azarath. You can even throw an Andariel's build. So it's getting all stats. That's a pretty good stat. We also get attack speed, which is the same. It actually got a nerf on attack speed by 1%, but whatever. Cold resistance, okay, so it's like it's all about cold. And then you have another lucky hit proc chance over here. Unfortunately, you do lose out on damage to crowd control. But if you're just playing like a melee rogue, that doesn't really matter too much, because you would just go, well, you can now still benefit off of a melee rogue. Instead of going close quarters, you can actually just go momentum. That's going to be like the new hot thing, I think, for Season 5 for rogues. And you get like the damage to Dark Shrouds. But over here, what's really cool is you have another lucky hit proc chance. So this is double the chances of Andariels, but I believe it's like 1/3-ish, unless they have changed the number since then. I believe that was like, what, like 19,000 or something like that. So this is kind of nice that you have another like consistent way to do damage. I mean, if we add these together, I mean, these are two different chances, but it's going to make it a little bit more consistent for maybe some of the trash mobs, or just if you're making a pure build where you're just using Azarath, more consistency with this. I mean, this is basically just a tempered slot at the end of the day, but it's still not a bad thing to mess around with. Not bad. And then we have Banished Lord's Talisman. So this is the thing for like overpowered builds. And it actually got changed quite a bit. So we have max life. So we now have a defensive stat here. We also get attack speed, which is definitely good. Overpower damage, because it's all about overpower. Just a numerical stat increase. We lose out on the critical strike chance, though, which is kind of bad. Because, well, your critical strike needs to be the one that actually overpowers. So there's kind of a nerf in this sense. I'm not sure if I would recommend this item anymore. I mean, yeah, if you spend the resource, there is going to be a rogue build that can infinitely use ultimates as well as spam and get this infinite times. It's going to be really cool. I can't wait to show you guys that. It was actually going to be like one of the builds I wanted to play in Season 4, but what they did is they nerfed a potion that we never got like patch notes changes on that. So that build, unfortunately, is like the top 1% of the 1% can even build that build. But now, with so many things rolling with like additional resource, you could definitely run this. Now, there is another thing where with Rogue specifically that you can pop concealment and guarantee the thing that breaks your stealth guarantees the crit. It just adds another step into it, which I don't really like. And, well, you're just going to have to get your crit hit at strike chance somewhere else. But let me know, guys, if you think this item is kind of bad now. Because I would say, like, before, it was definitely, it had some sort of uses because you did get critical strike chance. Resource Gen was actually quite nice stat, but now we have more defensive stat. I feel like this is more like an all-in kind of cheesy item at the end of the day, but, well, it's going to be able to, I guess, have less consistency on it, but more survivability. I don't think that that item is going to be super top tier. Next up, Pensive Greaves. These were really cool in Season 0, so it allows you to get more movement speed. You also have critical strike chance against chilled enemies, which sounds good, and it is good against, again, some of the smaller trash things, but on the bosses, because they're not going to be considered affected by any crowd control until they actually get staggered. This basically is like a non-stat. We have Chill Slow Potency, so I guess you can maybe build this up if you're running, let's say, a cold imbue. This actually might be kind of good for certain builds if you require the thing to be frozen. And then we also have the cold resistance getting increased over here. And then the special unique power, which if you have the old one, this will be buffed, where you're able to get up to 25x more damage to chilled enemies. So this is actually a pretty nice damage here along with this. But if you look at other options like Yen's Blessing, or even if you run like Flicker Strike with the bonus damage, or if you're running the brand new boots, the Racnoth's Wake, you can get way more damage on a consistent basis against bosses. Even though, again, this doesn't sound that bad. Maybe for some like builds that can freeze consistently, we have the Rogue build that can use Heartseeker, and every single shot is going to make things like frozen pretty much with one of the new legendary aspects. And if you guys want to see the build for that, I already have it ready for you guys. This could be kind of like a more niche playstyle, and it's still going to be definitely pretty good. But at the moment, with Umbercrux being so powerful, you don't even need to build the stagger to actually like one-shot the boss, or kill the boss in like a couple seconds for the pit bosses on like pit 100 plus. And that was during when the pit bosses were bugged and had crazy HP. But we do have another implicit over here where Evade grants the 125% movement speed for 2 seconds instead of 1, and Evade grants Unhindered for 2 seconds, allowing you to move through targets. It's like the illusory boots back in Diablo 3. It's kind of a nice thing, so you don't like have the situation where you get stuck on monsters. Lets you just ignore unit collision. Good stuff, but I think that there are better options for boots. Like basically Racnoth's Wake, because you get the cooldown reduction, you get the bonus damage, and like I think you get all the resistances. Like those new boots, they're just like god tier. Like there's really no replacement for those boots. And on top of that, remember, you are losing out on some sort of like legendary aspect, which would be like you could throw in like Shared Misery. There's a lot of better things for Rogue at the end of the day, but I could see maybe some Sorks using it. But Sork already has this big problem with like once you get to the boss, it's not frozen. You do 0 DPS. It feels bad, but they are increasing the damage. It just, what this should have done, I think, is that like your enemies always count as chilled, even if not crowd controlled on a boss. It just needs that effect of like the enemy being considered chilled. Because otherwise, again, these are like 0 effectiveness. And on top of that, you could just run Esu's boots, right? And that would give you that critical strike chance that you would have, and you don't need to chill the enemies, which, again, bosses are the main problem. So I don't think those boots are worth running. Next up, though, Flicker Step. We were just talking about this. The reason why it's good is there are certain things in this game now that can scale with ultimate damage, which is pretty dang good. It gives you lightning res, like whatever on this. Damage reduction from close enemies is staying. And then when you evade, you get the cooldown reduction. So the biggest change here is really looking at the ultimate damage. Now for Rogue, there is a thing, I believe it's in the Paragon board or something, where like you can get more damage based on ultimate damage. So this already just fully caps you. Like I believe this on Hakan, if that thing doesn't have a cap, we'll have to wait and see. I'll have to read the full patch notes. If that thing doesn't get changed, I mean, what are we getting, like 60x damage with just this? I mean, this is almost like, if that's not something that has like some sort of internal cap, when you activate an ultimate skill, I think it's for like 8 seconds, you slap this on, you run the Hakan, and then you have so much ultimate damage that you are just going to have a huge multiplier, because it applies to all of your skills, not just your ultimate. Again, I'm going to have to double check on the cap on that if they have adjusted it. But again, if you get 60x, this is like a no-brainer. This thing will be pretty good. Yen's Blessing also here, getting a change. So the unique power didn't change over here. We have Resource Gen instead of Lucky Hit. So I'd say that's a win. Another really nice change is the resistances to all elements, because this will help you res cap pretty easy. But there's already a better pair of boots called Racnoth's, which gives you all res, gives you cooldown reduction, and some sort of source of like damage. And it has another bonus damage. I've already mentioned Racnoth's, so I won't mention it again. But that's like the new god tier boots. that you absolutely must play. We're going to actually update a video of like all the uniques that you must play, just like, you know, in the previous season. Well, we had certain uniques that, yeah, they were kind of like best in slot, like Ring of Starless Skies, Harlequin Crest, pretty much best in slot. We'll make an update to that after we check out all of them. But next up, Razor Plate. Not too much of a change over here. The only change we see is that the Thorns actually has a chance to deal up to 50x more damage. The rest of the stats aren't really different. But the thing with Razor Plate, though, if you have an old one, guys, do not get rid of it. Because the unique power is the only thing that changes, this one can be saved from the Eternal, or whatever. When the update comes out, guys, your Razor Plates will get that buff. Unless, of course, you have like a 100. I'm guessing a 100 stays the same, but if you get a 150, it'll go to 200. I'm sure it probably scales with it unless it rerolls, but as far as I'm aware of, it's just going to scale whatever numbers in terms of percents. Next up, though, we have Soul Brand, which this is the thing that every time you play Duril, you always drop this and you're like, no, this is garbage, right? So let's see if it's actually worth running. So, well, we get max life, potion capacity. Well, the potion capacity is pretty memes. Barrier generation got increased by quite a bit. I mean, if we get this greater affix, 60% barrier, that might actually be kind of good on Sork, right? Or any build. Heck, Rogue can actually use barriers now. I might consider that. We also get damage reduction while healthy, which is an easy stat for this. Now, your healing potion no longer heals instantly, and it grants you a barrier for 200% of it instead. The problem that I have with this is the duration is 4, while we have lots of things that last 8 with like Temerity. You also gain up to 30% damage reduction while you have a barrier, and you can also drink a potion while at full life. So that could be something to consider. I'm not going to send this out as like absolute garbage, but I think it may have some uses for some survivability, even though the higher end like Sorks will just probably play Ryman because it sucks everything up and makes things kind of nice. I wish we had another like damage reduction here. I don't really like the potion capacity. I'd rather that be like percent life. That way all those barriers scale way higher. I think that would have been kind of cool to have, but we do get some max life out of it, and we'll see where it goes. But that's like in the middle ground. Now, we're running into the God S tier stuff, and I already know this one's going to be pretty much the best pair of gloves for a lot of builds. So let's get into it. So don't read the old stuff. The old stuff is this is basically a brand new item. All right, so we get attack speed. That's a God tier stat. Critical strike chance. That's a God tier stat. Now, for certain builds, lucky hit chance is one of the best things to roll. And what's crazy with this is it rolls to 51.8%. Which this is crazy levels. On average, you can get maybe like, I think on a GA it rolls like 9 lucky hit. So that means that this is giving you 5 times the amount, and that's not even counting if you get this to roll a greater affix. Now, the thing with this is there's also a lucky hit chance to apply a crowd control effect, which is like, okay, whatever, but that can roll up to 51%. That's a crazy amount too. And then with the other special power where your attacks randomly deal 1 to a percent of their normal damage. Obviously, that also needs to roll good for this thing to have really good value. But the rest of the stats, the one thing to take note with this, look at the range. For the attack speed, we either get 0.1 to 8.7. That is a huge roll. So basically, Fist of Fate is going to be the new item. I honestly think that this is going to be one of the most sought after items for a lot of builds. Anything that's using Lucky Hit has to play this, and there's going to be a lot of buffs to Lucky Hit. Like on the campfire that we just watched, the Necromancer basically got double Lucky Hit on almost all the skills. It's actually crazy how much lucky hit chance from the base that Necromancer is getting. So maybe they may want to consider running this if it does become viable. So just as a heads up, if you want to get rich, I'm going to tell you guys, Fist of Fate, if you get a good rolled one, okay, that is from the Beast in Ice. Beast in Ice is also getting an update in Season 5, making it much, much easier to consistently actually farm them because you don't have to go through the long dungeon. You don't have to craft the thing anymore. You just go in. So that's going to be a nice change. And plus, you can resummon the bosses again and again. So I actually think a greater affixed Fist of Fate, specifically on Lucky Hit Chance, will be the next like sought-after God tier item. Obviously, yes, you want to get lots of things greater affix, but it's going to be the hardest thing in the entire game to roll because, well, you need so many of these things to kind of roll decent. But specifically, I think greater affix lucky hit chance is the best stat to look out for. So this is definitely an absolute like must for certain builds. Now we're running into Frostburn, and like I kind of got excited with this because I'm like, oh, we have this like lucky hit chance to deal. And I'm like, wait, if we just want lucky hit, there's no way I'm not playing Fist of Fate, right? I almost feel like this one's kind of pointless, though, but we'll go over it. So it has a new implicit of Lucky Hit Chance, which is cool. We get attack speed, which is good stat. Fire and Cold, which support its special 2 new abilities. which is a chance to deal some set amount of fire or cold damage. Now, if you roll both of those to be greater affix, it might not actually be that bad, but then I'm thinking, well, like, if you're going to try to play a lucky hit build, wouldn't you just play this? This over here, it does do 1 to 300% damage, but the way it works is you cut off the 200 from it, and that's the increased damage that you would get. So basically, a 301 would be a chance to deal like up to like 100% more damage, because we're talking about like the variance in terms of range. So the thing is that will allow for like crazier numbers. But if you want more consistency, I mean, if these roll greater affix, I'm curious to see what they do with this. If these are both 8,000 apiece, I don't think it's really that bad as an item, but again, most players that are looking at some sort of lucky hit chance build aren't going to be relying off of this like tempered stat. This used to be really good, but they had nerfed it since I believe the season 4 PTR a long time ago. But it may be something to consider. Again, I'm not sure if the greater affix ups the chance or the damage. My assumption is the damage, because it's kind of like a brand new thing that we didn't have the ability to roll before. But it also does boost up your fire and cold damage by quite a bit. But the main concern that I have with this is like we don't get critical strike chance. We do lose out on the ranks to the skill that we're using, unless you're just using this for the source of your damage, which is a part of a build. But if we add these together, all right, like there's like an 80% chance to deal that sort of damage versus Undarl's at a 20%. So again, might be something to consider. Then we still have basically the same like ability, but the number got increased by a lot. We have a lucky hit chance up to a 60% chance to freeze enemies, and this is pretty big for the sorceress as well as the rogue, where you get like this big multiplier if you hit a frozen enemy with certain like glyphs and stuff. So don't sign it out as completely trash. I almost thought this item was kind of pointless though, but we'll wait and see. Again, a greater affix is how these actually affect the item. Next up, we got Pain Gorgers, which unfortunately, I think that their whole goal is really to buff certain things, but like it's kind of awkward because when I look at like the old one, critical strike chance is one of the good stats in gloves, right? Now they removed that. Now we still have attack speed, but they nerfed it by 1%. I don't even know why they nerfed it by 1%, but they did. We also have cooldown reduction. So cooldown reduction is definitely a good stat to have. We also have a chance to stun, which, whatever. The nice thing is we do get range to basic skills, but we lose out on this. And I think critical strike chance is a pretty big thing to lose out on, depending on the build. With Barbarian, you can actually get close to like 100% crit, so it's a little bit more forgiving on Barbarian to like lose out on this versus like a rogue build that was using it. And most Heartseeker rogue builds honestly weren't playing Pain Gorgers, but there are some that were hitting pretty hard, and now you at least have basic skills, so it's kind of a give and a take. Maybe you can get some crit elsewhere, but the power is essentially the same. Next up, with the Godslayer over here, which is actually a pretty good item already, we also now get all stats, which is a really good stat. Life hasn't changed. We also get 67% at the higher end to elites. Cooldown reduction over here is still there, and it is actually buffed by 1%, and then it still has the same ability over here, same cooldown. Temerity is actually getting some nice buffs over here. So with Temerity, we have the maximum life over here. That's a brand new stat. We also get extra healing received, which we had before, but the number has changed. We also get damage reduction while healthy, which is a good stat. And then we have a chance to restore life, which we had. So the potion drop rate has gotten removed off of it, which is good. That's a bad stat anyways. So as far as the max life, whatever, like you're still getting more increased HP, which helps because the effects that heal you beyond 100% of life, this is getting buffed by 20%. So you basically could double up your HP. And remember, you are sacrificing basically one of the stats that is pretty good going into Season 5, which is going to be your main character stats. I wish this kind of just had all stats instead of maybe the lucky hit or healing received. Just to get like that main stat for your character is going to be really key to get a lot more damage, and obviously gives you survivability. And then on top of that, we have Tactics of the Dawning Sky. Most people just never ran these, and let's see if they're actually any good. So we have the all stats over here, which is, again, pretty nice, and it's gotten a buff. We also have movement speed, so that's going to be nice for just, moving around faster. We also now have maximum to all resistances, which is a very, very good stat, but most people don't really need insane survivability in the game at the moment. And then we have resistance to all elements, which is great, but I'm going to mention it one more time. The Raknos Wake boots give you the resistances and cooldown reduction and damage. Those boots are like god tier, so I would just recommend running those if you're really hurting to cap resistances. Now, there is a special ability that gives you a huge boost to your maximum resistances, and this basically gives you the max amount. I believe 85 is the max, right, in the game, so plus after 10, that doesn't do anything, so if you get this to roll, as far as more, yeah, it's 85, but yeah, if you get this to, you don't even need perfect rolls on this. So you can literally roll bottom roll on this, and then like this, if you just masterwork it, you're going to get the 10% anyways. So as long as you are res cap, which this is going to allow you to do, it's pretty easy. It does give you that huge bonus. I don't like how it can only affect one at a time, and you still have to take that first attack. So if your idea is, I'm going to prevent one-shots, well, you still have to take that first initial damage, so it doesn't matter. I think these, unfortunately, should have just, like, they should have just pumped all of these numbers right here, and then they just give it, like, 7% max res. You run this in Tyraels, and you just GG the game. It actually might make the game too easy. We'll wait and see what happens with this, but getting a GA on a 2.5 isn't going to be insane. I mean, you're going to max out anyways from this, so this is almost like a pointless stat, right? So I just don't see this being viable, unfortunately. I was hoping these would be good, because it's a really cool idea. If you look at maximum resistance in any action RPG, it is a super god tier stat, but because Diablo 4, there isn't really hard content where you're like, oh, I need insane survivability, right? It's usually like, oh, I can't do enough damage because the pit boss is going to take me 3 hours to kill, which is kind of your bottleneck when you get to the very far of the end game, unless you have an immortal build. So let me know, guys. I know this was kind of a long video, wow, but we had to go over all of them. Which uniques are you guys the most excited about? And we're gonna be updating another video with going over all of the best uniques. I know I mentioned Raknos, but that did not get changed. We just went over the ones that got changed. And so if you're new here and you want to see the video about all the uniques that you definitely want to play in Season 5, and this is your first time here, subscribe, turn on the bell. It's gonna be a really, really important video. Anyways, take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. And let me know your thoughts on the uniques.